Hi everyone, welcome to my broadcast. Sorry, just realised my button was undone. These things happen. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm using one of my new microphones, as you can see. I've upgraded a bit of my tech over the last little while, so just getting used to a few different things. And I have a new wonderful little fandangled little stand that actually follows me around. So if I move, you move too. Just wanted to come back and say hello, that I'm back. I've had one of, again, I come back and I always say this. It's just, I have had one of these years that has just sort of been very sort of stop start. I've been sort of all over the place. And most recently, we went on a big trip over to Thailand and Vietnam. Now, I've been to Thailand before, I've been several times actually, and by several, I mean probably five or six. And then we also went to Vietnam, which was amazing. And again, some places that I hadn't been. I've been to Vietnam before, but hadn't necessarily been to the places that we went to. So went to Hanoi, went for a cruise on Ha Long Bay. We stayed in Nha Trang, out in a beautiful, beautiful resort that just I could tell you what it's like, but you probably wouldn't believe me. It was just absolute luxury. We were so fortunate to go. It was a lovely family trip. But yeah, to a place where we were, we were on a cliff top. We had our own butler. Yeah, it was just everything all in one. When we were in Thailand, we were in Koh Samui, which was amazing, which I'd been to before, but Cotswolds Boy hadn't been. And the resort again was lovely, but we sort of decided that we were going to really sort of experience the sort of culture and the street life and all of that. So most nights, rather than staying at the resort, we went down into Fisherman's Village and literally had, ridiculously cheap cocktails on the beach with sand between our toes, and wearing flip-flops and eating street food and all of that sort of stuff. Going to one of the local bars and making friends with a ladyboy. So we actually had a really, really good time. And I love experiencing the culture of these places, just to sort of, see how the locals live, taste the local food, and not be afraid to. And look, sometimes it's not a great idea. I'm not going to lie, I've had a few cases of barley belly over the years, but look, this was really, really good. So I forgot how much I actually missed it until I went back, because this was probably my first time back for probably close to 10 years, I'd say, since I went there last. And it's just, honestly, it's heaven on earth. Heaven on earth. If any of you are thinking about going, please do. You'll absolutely love it. The Thai people and the Vietnamese people, so lovely, so friendly, can't do enough for you. And they're just beautiful people. So if you're ever thinking about going, please go. I cannot rate it highly enough. But yeah, look, back on deck and having a chat about a few different things. As you know, I've sort of been writing a blog over the past sort of, what is it, 12 months now, probably. And that's been sort of really, really good, just in terms of addressing certain things that I've sort of been going through, and trying to provide a bit of a source for people that would be going through very sort of similar things, but feel like they're sort of isolated and alone. When I was going through a lot of this stuff, there wasn't really any resources that, there was nothing like YouTube. There was no, there wasn't even any internet for a lot of it. That could have helped but didn't, and I never really had that. So the aim and even of this YouTube channel was really to, I guess, share my experiences and relate to people who sort of go through something similar, who might think that they're alone out there, that they're the only ones that have ever experienced it, or just feel sort of isolated or not sure how to deal with it or anything like that. That's the whole reason that this exists, and this is what I'm passionate about, really, because if I can just even relate to one person that has been going through stuff like bullying or infertility or any of the numerous other things that sort of I've discussed in my blog, then that makes me extremely happy. But on the back of that, and I think I've also sort of discussed a lot of my sort of evolving sort of spirituality and that side of things as well, which sort of includes me going to a spiritualist church nearby here in the Cotswolds. So I do that every other Thursday, as well as my clubber size classes, which I will never miss because I absolutely love it. And I've lost over 3 stone from doing it. So anyway, back to the spiritualist thing. But yeah, so I've been going to a spiritualist church, and it's a really, really lovely, welcoming environment. And what I've really sort of been noticing over the past 12 months is that very much I've been opening up myself and my mindset to, these sort of spiritualistic and holistic sort of approaches. Crystals, sound baths, singing bowls, frequency vibrations, all of this sort of stuff that a lot of people would go, oh, that's a bit loop-de-loo, or, that's a little bit witchy-poo, weird, even down to, sort of like doing sage smudging and that sort of thing, which isn't something I never thought that I would do, lighting chakra candles and that sort of stuff. And I'm very much sort of enjoying my journey, to be honest. And I'm feeling like the more that I open my mind to it, the more that I want to know about it. And so it's really something, again, it's sort of a journey. And I know that sounds so cliche, but it really is, because the more that you sort of open your mind to something, the more curious you become, the more that you want to find out about it. So anyway, so I'm still sort of going down that path. I've got one of these, which I'll show you here, and you would have seen them probably online. So it's an obsidian in there with amethyst and jade and a few other things, which again sort of raises your frequency and does these sorts of things. And yeah, so look, it's sort of something, it's one of the paths that I'm on a little bit, which I think is always a good thing. I guess the next little bit for me, is probably, again, something that I've sort of touched on before, because we came to the decision earlier this year that we weren't going to have children after going through IVF and going and having a look at, starting the sort of adoption process. And part of my journey into all of this stuff was really sort of coming to grips with that decision and making that decision, which again is something that we put a lot of thought into and I had a lot of discussion about. And it's funny, as you grow up and as you get into adulthood, you don't necessarily think too long and hard about having kids. It's just assumed, and you don't go through the process of really sort of discussing what it will mean for your life and longer term and for your finances and all this sort of stuff. It's just not something that you really discuss in that much detail. It's like, well, okay, you get pregnant, you have a kid. Whereas the decision not to have a child requires so much more discussion and so much more thought, and a lot goes into getting to a point where you make that decision. It's one of those things that I guess I never necessarily thought that I would be going down that path. But now that we have, and I had a lot of anxiety in and around that, looking at all of that, and making that decision. And, because there's so many layers that you have to go through. It's, if I don't have a child, then you've got to look at that sort of almost a grieving process, because you have to then sort of that sort of part of your life sort of dies. You have to, you have to grieve for what you could have had but didn't have. You've got to grieve for never that you're not ever going to be a grandparent. You're going to grieve for their not having child's birthdays, or not going to watch them play sport, and not having the joy of seeing them married, and not all of those sorts of things that my parents never had to worry about, never had to think about. My grandparents never had to worry about or think about. But it's being child free, it's those sorts of things that you now think, well, I'm going to miss out on all of that, and you've got to be okay with that. And again, that's a massive grieving process, more than I thought would ever be a thing, to be perfectly honest. You've got to grieve for the friendship groups that will have children, and then their lives change and their groups expand, and so it's going to be for the lost friendships, or the friendships that move on because of it. And that's something that I never ever sort of considered. You've then also got to consider how that affects my parents, because my parents are now, unless my sisters have kids, they're not going to be grandparents. So, it's not only sort of directly affects you, but it affects your other immediate family. So you've got to be okay with all of those sort of discussions. And even, once you make the decision, you've got to be all right with telling people that, and sort of feeling that you have to almost justify it. Not that you have to, but you just sort of have that inner sort of, not inner guilt, but it's just an inner feeling that you sort of need to justify your decision, and explain your decision, which again, you shouldn't have to, but you do. So, there's a lot that sort of goes into it, but we've reached that point, and making that decision for me, because I was getting a lot of anxiety tied in and around, well, if we're going to do it naturally, or we're going to go through IVF, or we're going to, we've got to do these processes, you've got to put things in place, you've got to do all of that, and we weren't doing that. And so, there was a lot of anxiety in and around the process that I was getting really worked up about. But having made the decision that we're going to go child free, honestly, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. And I feel so much better about myself. I feel so much better about life and about my situation and everything like that, that, I kind of wish I'd made the call sooner, if I'm completely honest with you. So look, it's, it is one of those things, but it means I can sort of focus on me now, and I can focus on the things that I want to do. Like I want to try and do a little bit more television, and I want to do a bit more on the travel side, and I want to, sort of explore different avenues. So that's sort of where I got to, and where I'm currently at, which I think is a really good spot. So so that's sort of the current version of here we are, and a bit of an update, and the process that you have to go through, that you've got to be okay with going through, but you've got to also then sort of say, okay, I'm going to leave that part of my life behind now and move forward. Because again, life's always sort of about moving forward. So you have to be ready for that. You've got to be ready to make that decision. You can't then say the words and then keep looking back in retrospect. You sort of have to cut it loose and move forward. So so that's that. The other part of that is, I sort of got a bit sidetracked before, but part of when I last went to church, my grandparents came through, which was amazing, because they told me off about my 2 speeding fines, which I'd literally gotten through the post that day. So yes, I've been heavenly scolded, and also told that I needed to change my 2 back tyres, which I knew I needed to, but I was sort of putting off until the MOT, but they said get them done, so I've now got them done. What they also did say, and this was really interesting, and this is something that I actually have put into place, is that they said that I should write a book. and that it would be, you know, chopping and changing things and doing bits and pieces. So what has actually transpired over the last sort of couple of weeks is that I have engaged a independent publisher. So I'm going to self-publish um, a book based on my blog. So I'm really excited about that. And again, it sort of cuts into the whole chopping and changing and bits from here and bits from there and all of that. So that is now underway. So I'm hoping that my project manager comes back to me over the course of the week after pulling all of those source material together and all of that. So yes, it's really, really exciting. And I feel like I've got a spirit blessing on that one. So that's all good. But yeah, so it looks exciting times ahead. Obviously, I'll come back and tell you a little bit more about the book as it sort of is in its progression stage. I have a title. It's a very Aussie title, but the theme of it is going to be sort of being a yes person, and, you know, when opportunities present themselves, you know, taking the opportunity rather than sitting back and overthinking it, or, you know, deciding not to do something because of expectation or whatever else. So you have to, you know, you have to be true to yourself, and you've got to follow your own path. And that's sort of the way that the book is going to run. So anyway, I will keep you updated. Thank you so much for continuing to watch my videos. And as I said, I'm really here to sort of build a community in and around people who are interested in life stuff, and, you know, want a bit of an uplifting story, and, you know, want to know that people are going through things the same as what you are. You're not alone. You're not isolated. We're all in this together. So have a wonderful day, and I will see you in my next video.